Welcome, fellow curious souls, to a journey unlike any other. Have you ever wondered about the true story behind a simple cup? Beyond the history books, what secrets did it hold for the people of the Middle Ages? I'm here to unveil the medieval cup, hope, health, and havoc. A tale that began with the humble wooden tankard of a peasant, where small beer was a lifeline against disease, a daily dose of hope and health in a harsh world. You'll travel with us to the solemn cloisters of monasteries, where holy brews held surprising power. Then dive headfirst into the raucous village taverns, where laughter, love, and lively havoc erupted nightly. We'll even sneak into opulent noble feasts, witnessing how wine became a symbol of status, masking a more refined, elegant chaos. We've seen the cup bring joy, solace, and even despair in the shadow of the Black Death. So, if this glimpse into the past sparks your imagination and you find this journey truly insightful, consider giving this video a like. It helps us know we're on the right track. For more fascinating stories from forgotten eras, don't hesitate to subscribe and join our growing community. And as you embark on this unique historical adventure with us, I'd love to know, where in the world are you experiencing this story from? Let me know in the comments below. Forget the dusty tomes and the grand pronouncements of kings. Today we're diving into the heart of the common folk, where life was a robust, often muddy, and perpetually thirsty affair. And at the center of it all, cradled in calloused hands or presented with a flourish, was the cup. Not just any cup, mind you, but the medieval cup, a vessel overflowing with hope, health, and an astonishing amount of havoc. You are about to step into the cozy, smoky embrace of a small timber-framed inn, its very planks whispering tales of 1,000 evenings gone by. The air here is a heady mix, the earthy scent of straw on the floor, the lingering ghost of wood smoke from the hearth, and, most gloriously, the rich, yeasty aroma of young, freshly brewed ale. This isn't some grand, sprawling mead hall fit for a king and his boisterous knights. No, this is the Sow and Whistle, a place humble in stature but colossal in spirit, nestled snugly on the fringes of a bustling village. And at the heart of this convivial chaos, wielding a ladle with the grace of a seasoned conductor, is Dame Isolde. Picture her now, not the stern, apron-clad caricature you might imagine, but a woman whose eyes, crinkled at the corners from years of laughter and keen observation, hold the depth of ancient wisdom. Her movements are fluid, purposeful, as she tends to the great wooden vats of fermenting brew, her hands, strong from years of kneading dough and stirring mash, moving with a silent poetry. The melodious, slightly off-key strains of a lute from a corner, played by a traveling minstrel who'd clearly had too much of Isolde's finest, mingle with the soft, contented murmurs of familiar patrons. It's a symphony of daily life, a chaotic harmony. And Isolde, without uttering a single note, is its undisputed maestro. You see, Isolde is not merely a brewer. Oh no, she is the soul of this place, the very yeast that makes the community rise. Her wit sharper than any knight's sword, and her grace smoother than the finest silk, are her primary tools. With them, she doesn't just keep things under control, She transforms the very seeds of havoc, the simmering tensions, the petty squabbles, the occasional drunken declaration of undying love for a goose, into witty banter, harmless anecdotes, and sometimes even impromptu, if slightly clumsy, dances. You will recognize with a smile the soft yet incredibly effective power of the medieval woman, who, in her unassuming way, holds both the cup of the common folk and the very pulse of the community in her capable, ale-stained hands. Isolde's journey to becoming the esteemed alewife of the Sow and Whistle wasn't born from a grand lineage or a royal decree. No. It was woven from the sturdy threads of necessity and an almost magical intuition for fermentation. In a world where water was often a gamble with death, teeming with invisible horrors that turned bellies inside out, ale was not a luxury, it was a lifeline. Small beer, as it was affectionately known, was the hydrating, nourishing backbone of daily life, safer than any stream or well, even for children and clergy. And who, you might ask, were the unsung heroes of this vital industry? Often it was the women. While men toiled in the fields or fought in wars, women like Isolde mastered the subtle art of brewing in their own homes, their brewing skills passed down like treasured heirlooms from mother to daughter, an oral tradition steeped in the sweet earthy knowledge of grain and yeast. Isolde's mother, a formidable woman herself, had taught her not just how to mash the barley and tend the fires, but how to listen to the whisper of the fermentation, how to coax the perfect froth, and, crucially, how to read the moods of men as easily as she could read the bubbles in a freshly poured pint. Her reputation spread far beyond the village boundaries. Folks would travel miles just to sample Isolde's gold dust ale, rumored to cure everything from a melancholic spirit to a stubborn case of indigestion. Results may vary, naturally. But it wasn't just the ale, it was her. She possessed a unique ability to navigate the choppy waters of human interaction, a talent far more valuable than any fancy brewing equipment. Her inn was not merely a place to drink. It was a sanctuary, a confessional, a news hub, and occasionally a makeshift courtroom where minor disputes were settled not by a magistrate's gavel, but by Isolde's calm, steady gaze and a well-timed, subtly humorous remark. One blustery evening, as the wind howled outside like a banshee with a toothache, the inn was filled with the usual motley crew. Farmers with dirt-stained hands, a weary merchant counting his meager profits, and, inevitably, a trio of rather over-served soldiers from the nearby garrison. Their faces, flushed crimson from Isolde's hardy brew, were beginning to contort into expressions of belligerence. One, a burly brute named Grumble, slammed his tankard down with a thud that echoed through the room, declaring in a voice that scraped like rusted iron, "This ale tastes like a goblin's sock." A hush fell over the room, as thick and heavy as old ale dregs. Heads turned, anticipating the inevitable clash. But Isolde, without missing a beat, merely leaned across the counter. Her eyes, usually twinkling with merriment, now holding a silent, steely glint. She didn't raise her voice, didn't scowl, didn't even scowl. Instead, a gentle, almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips. "Ah, Grungle," she murmured, her voice a low, melodious hum that somehow cut through the tension like a hot knife through butter. And here I thought you were the only goblin in this establishment. Perhaps your palate is simply more accustomed to the finer notes of a foot." A beat of stunned silence, then a ripple of chuckles. Grungle's mouth, already agape, snapped shut. His face, still red, now shifted from anger to a bewildered shade of purple. He tried to muster a retort, but the words seemed to have vanished, spirited away by Isolde's quiet wit. He merely stared, then with a huff that sounded suspiciously like a deflating bladder, he turned and with his equally confused companions stumbled toward the door. They lurched out into the howling wind as if touched by a cool, invisible breeze that had not only cleared their heads, but also gently guided them away, leaving behind a palpable calm in the inn. It was a true master class in diffusing potential havoc without ever raising a fist or even a voice. Isolde's power wasn't in brute force, but in the subtle art of making a fool feel like a fool, without them quite realizing how they'd gotten there. Of course, not all challenges came in the form of drunken soldiers. There were the dreaded ale tasters, the medieval equivalent of modern-day health inspectors, only with far less scientific method and a lot more drama. These official busybodies, often pompous and puffed up with their own self-importance, would stride into the inn, their faces set in expressions of stern disapproval, as if they'd just smelled a bad fish. Their job? To ensure the ale was of proper quality, and more importantly, that the alewife wasn't shortchanging the patrons on volume or potency. One particularly portly ale taster, a man named Master Godfrey, with a walrus mustache that seemed to droop with perpetual judgment, would invariably demand a sample of Isolde's latest brew. "Humph," he'd grunt, swirling the ale in his tankard, his brow furrowed in concentration. Isolde, ever the picture of serenity, would merely offer him a warm, knowing smile. "Master Godfrey," she'd say, her voice as smooth as cream, "I trust you'll find this batch as invigorating as a spring morning. I even heard the village elder, Lord Cedric, declare it put the spring back in his step, though, mind you, he is rather fond of exaggeration." Godfrey, always eager to align himself with the gentry, would puff out his chest. "Indeed, Lord Cedric, you say? Well, let us see if it lives up to such a grand pronouncement." He'd take a long, dramatic swig, his eyes closing in exaggerated contemplation. Isolde, meanwhile, would discreetly slide a small, freshly baked honey cake across the counter, just within his reach. Godfrey, a man of simple pleasures despite his lofty title, would eye the cake, then the ale. The battle was brief. The allure of warm honey and the subtle flattery always won. He'd clear his throat, wipe his mustache with the back of his hand, and declare, "A fine ale, Dame Isolde, a very fine ale indeed. Perhaps a touch rustic, but robust. Keep up the good work." And, with a barely perceptible nod and a quick grab of the honey cake, he'd be off, leaving Isolde to discreetly wipe a small, triumphant smirk from her lips. She understood that sometimes bending the rules wasn't about defiance. It was about the subtle art of human persuasion, a wink in the right direction, a well-timed jest, a morsel of something sweet. Her intelligence wasn't academic, it was street smart, people smart, a cleverness honed by years of managing expectations and deflecting bureaucratic nonsense with the lightest of touches. Beyond the daily hustle and the occasional skirmish with inspectors, Isolde harbored a quiet, deeply personal hope. It wasn't for riches or noble titles, but for something far more precious in the rigid hierarchy of the Middle Ages: independence. In a time when women's lives were largely dictated by their fathers, brothers, or husbands, Isolde, as an alewife, carved out a unique space of self-sufficiency. Her inn was her domain, her brew her craft, and her profits, however modest, were hers. This wasn't just about making a living. It was about making a life on her own terms. As she stirred the mash in her copper pot, the steam rising around her like a mystical veil, she would often fall into a deep contemplation. She wasn't just brewing ale, she was brewing her own future, drop by precious drop. The thought of being beholden to no man, of making her own decisions, of being the sole mistress of her destiny, was a constant, shimmering ember of hope in her heart. It was a profound reflection on the value of personal freedom, a quiet revolution brewing beneath the surface of everyday life. This was the true essence of the alewife's cup, not just a vessel for drink, but a chalice of quiet liberty.
As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, the inn would gradually empty. The last hearty laugh would fade into the night, the lute would fall silent, and the clatter of tankards would cease. Only Isolde would remain, meticulously tidying her domain, her movements now slower, more reflective. When the last chair was righted, the last table wiped clean, you would find her by the dying embers of the hearth, a single, humble cup in her hand. It wasn't ale this time, but a mug of warm, spiced apple cider, its gentle aroma filling the quiet space. This wasn't the kind of loneliness that chills the bones or brings tears to the eyes. No, this was a sacred, contemplative solitude, the kind where the day's cacophony recedes and the gentle hum of the universe takes over. She'd sip the cider, its warmth spreading through her, a comforting balm after a long day of navigating human currents. Her gaze would be fixed on the dancing flames, each flickering light a memory, a thought, a quiet meditation on the ebb and flow of life. She might recall a snippet of a customer's story, a line from a minstrel's song, or simply the rhythmic breathing of her own quiet strength. In these solitary hours, bathed in the gentle glow of the fire, Isolde truly owned her space, her thoughts, her very being. This wasn't a sad solitude, but a rich, restorative one, where the day's havoc melted away, leaving only the profound peace of health, mental, emotional, and spiritual, to fill the empty inn. As the last ember faded to a soft orange glow, Isolde would finally rise, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. Her day filled with the demands of brewing, serving, and subtly managing the human comedy was done. She knew that tomorrow the cycle would begin anew. The sun would rise, the thirst would return, and the laughter and squabbles would once more fill the sow and whistle. But for tonight,
There was only the peaceful quiet, the lingering scent of apples and wood smoke, and the profound understanding that even amidst the chaos of the medieval world, a woman with a cup in her hand, a twinkle in her eye, and a heart full of quiet hope could indeed, with graceful power, command her own destiny.
To prepare yourself for another delightful detour into the bewilderingly brilliant world of medieval Europe. From the bustling warmth of the alewife's hearth, where the cup brought both community and quiet strength, our journey now takes a different turn. This time, we're not just chasing the intoxicating scent of fermented grain from a convivial inn. We're following the faint, intriguing aroma of, well, a medieval apothecary. So, draw a deep breath and let's explore a most curious phenomenon. The cup as a concoction, the brew as a cure, and the physician who sometimes needed his own medicine a little too much. You will step, rather gingerly, I might add, into the small, perpetually shadowed house of Master Grimshaw. Now, Grimshaw wasn't your average medieval GP, mostly because the concept of a GP was about as developed as the flushing toilet. He was more of a physician in the loosest, most charmingly speculative sense of the word. His abode, a jumble of drying herbs strung from the rafters like forgotten dreams, and bubbling concoctions simmering on the hearth, smells precisely as you'd imagine. A rather dizzying cocktail of rosemary, dried lavender, and, unmistakable, the faint, comforting whiff of fermented grapes. Yes, dear friend, the good Master Grimshaw, a man whose weary eyes held the weight of every ailment he'd ever failed to cure, was rather fond of a robust medicinal wine. In the Middle Ages, when science was, shall we say, still learning to crawl, alcohol was not merely a drink. It was a bona fide superstar of the medieval medicine cabinet. It was the Swiss army knife of remedies, a disinfectant for wounds, though likely burning like the fires of purgatory itself, a potent painkiller, which it still is, let's be honest, a comforting sedative, guaranteed to make you forget you ever had a headache, or a limb for that matter, and even, on occasion, a spiritual anodyne. Feeling a bit possessed by a mischievous imp? Have a dram of this, you might hear. Or, more likely, your leg is gangrenous and smells like a forgotten fish. A generous swig of fortified wine will surely dull the pain, or your awareness of the pain, which is almost the same thing, isn't it? You will witness Grimshaw, his long, bony fingers, surprisingly nimble, skillfully concocting various medicinal wines. He pours deep red liquid from a clay jug into a mortar, then grinds dried poppies, mandrake root, handle with extreme caution, please, and perhaps a few suspiciously shiny pebbles into a fine powder. This, he explains with a grave nod, will be mixed with a robust, unwatered wine, then left to steep under a full moon, whispered incantations optional but recommended for placebo effect. He truly believes in his craft, this Grimshaw. But as you watch him measure a particularly potent concoction, you'll catch a flicker in his weary eyes, a shadow of worry, a silent acknowledgement that the line between a life-saving remedy and a descent into oblivion, a slip
into true addiction sometimes seemed frighteningly thin. It's like walking a tightrope over a vat of, well, more wine, really. The prevailing medical theory of the day, humorously enough, revolved around the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling sluggish? Too much phlegm. A bit too choleric? Must be that yellow bile. And alcohol, bless its versatile heart, was seen as a marvelous tool for rebalancing these temperamental bodily fluids. It could warm the cold, dry the damp, loosen the tight, and generally put things right, or at least put them to sleep. Grimshaw, for instance, had a particularly popular elixir he called Grimshaw's Golden Glow, a fiery brandy infused with ginger and cinnamon, which he swore could chase the chills from the most stubborn of constitutions and restore the mirth to even the most miserable soul. And restore mirth it often did, at least until the effects wore off and the headache set in. He often prescribed it for the aches of the aged, the sniffles of the sickly, and the general malaise of a hard medieval life. You'd see a stoic old farmer, whose joints creaked like an unoiled wagon wheel, take a generous sip of the golden glow. You'd watch as the lines of fatigue around his eyes softened, his shoulders, usually hunched with years of toil, seemed to relax by an almost imperceptible inch. A sigh, deep and contented, would escape his lips. It wasn't a sudden, miraculous cure, but a gradual numbing sensation, like a warm current flowing through every strained muscle, bringing a temporary, blessed relaxation. For many, it was the only solace they knew, a fleeting moment of respite from a world that offered little comfort. But he understood, perhaps more acutely than most, that the effects of his golden glow were more than just physical. He'd seen the gnawing anxieties of the common folk, the quiet despair that settled in after a bad harvest or the loss of a child. He understood that a stiff drink could be a temporary balm for the soul, a silent companion that helped his patients and sometimes himself set aside worries, finding a fragile, fleeting peace in their troubled hearts. He often joked that his most effective cures were administered not with a scalpel, but with a tankard, though he'd follow that with a melancholy chuckle. It was this aspect, the mental health side of alcohol, that truly captivated Grimshaw. He saw the way a weary widow, consumed by grief, would find a moment of peace, her trembling hand steadied by a sip of his fortified wine. Or the blacksmith, his mind riddled with debts and fears, would, for a few precious hours, find a quiet oblivion. Alcohol, for many, was not just a pain reliever for the body. It was a silent friend, a fleeting escape from the relentless grind of medieval existence. It allowed them to find a temporary solace in their souls, a brief respite from the ceaseless worries that plagued their waking hours. He truly believed in the hope that a well-crafted potion could bring, even if that hope was as fleeting as a midsummer's dream. However, every physician, even a medieval one who relied more on intuition than empirical evidence, has a loyal apprentice. Grimshaw's was a sharp-witted young man named Bartholomew. Bartholomew, with his keen eyes and even keener ear for village gossip, was the true silent observer of the village's inner workings. He would assist Grimshaw with his concoctions, but his real education came from watching the patients, watching the villagers after their cures, and what he saw, often, was a subtle form of havoc unfold, not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet erosion of human spirit. Bartholomew would often return from his errands, his brow furrowed, and share his observations with Grimshaw over a dinner of stew, and, inevitably, a modest medicinal glass of Grimshaw's less potent brew. "Master," he'd murmur, "I saw old Farmer Giles today. His eyes, once bright as a freshly polished coin, now they're just empty, like abandoned bird nests. And his wife, bless her heart, looked like a ghost haunting her own home. It's not the plague, master, nor the fever. It's something else." Grimshaw would nod, his own eyes reflecting a similar weariness. He knew what Bartholomew spoke of. Bartholomew had seen the true subtle side of alcohol's unchecked power. He'd seen young men, once full of vigor, lose their days to the bottom of a tankard, their ambition slowly replaced by a dull stupor. He'd witnessed families, once warm and bustling with life, slowly unravel, quietly broken, not by violence or dramatic betrayal, but by a silent forgetting, a slow drift into apathy. It was an insidious chaos, a havoc that crept in on velvet paws, leaving devastation not in shattered bones, but in shattered dreams and hollowed-out lives. This wasn't the kind of dramatic, cinematic chaos you see in the brawls at the alehouse. This was the quiet tragedy, the personal ruin that often went unnoticed until it was too late. Bartholomew, in his youthful wisdom, was seeing the dark underbelly of the miracle cure, a side that made Grimshaw sigh, a sound as deep and ancient as the very earth. Grimshaw, for all his wisdom, was, after all, only human, and in the chaotic, often unhygienic world of medieval medicine, even the most meticulous physician could make a truly memorable mistake. One particularly foggy morning, Grimshaw was feeling a touch under the weather himself, a peculiar ache in his lower back, which he attributed to a draughty window and perhaps a few too many late-night sessions with his anatomical diagrams, which, frankly, were about as accurate as a blindfolded archer. He decided to concoct a special blend for himself, something to loosen the humors, as he put it. He carefully selected his herbs, consulted his ancient leather-bound tome, which was mostly indecipherable Latin, but looked impressive, and began to mix. His hands, usually so precise, were a little fumbly that morning. He reached for the jar labeled poppy extract for soothing aches, but in the dim light and his own growing malaise, he accidentally grabbed the one next to it, labeled, in his own notoriously illegible script, Dreamweaver's Draught for deep, uninterrupted slumber. A common mistake, really. Who hasn't confused a painkiller with a potent sleeping potion before breakfast? He mixed the concoction with a generous splash of his strongest wine, took a hearty swig, and settled down in his favorite armchair, anticipating a gentle wave of pain relief. Instead, a wave of profound, utterly irresistible drowsiness washed over him. His head nodded once, twice, then slumped forward onto his chest with a soft thud. Bartholomew, entering the room a few minutes later, found his revered master snoring like a hibernating bear, a half-empty mug still clutched in his hand, and a beatific, if slightly comical smile on his face. Bartholomew, ever the discreet and loyal apprentice, merely raised an eyebrow. He sniffed the mug, his eyes widening slightly. "Ah," he murmured to himself, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. "It seems Master Grimshaw has prescribed himself a rather restful cure today." He gently removed the mug, covered his master with a threadbare blanket, and went about his duties, leaving Grimshaw to enjoy his unscheduled, yet undeniably profound, medical slumber. It was a subtle, amusing twist, a reminder that even the most learned among them were still prone to very human errors, and that the fragile line between clarity and blissful loss of control was sometimes just a misplaced label away. As the sun once again began its slow descent, Grimshaw awoke with a start, feeling surprisingly refreshed, though a tad bewildered. Did I nap?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Bartholomew, busy stirring a part of something vaguely medicinal, merely nodded. "A very deep nap, master. Most effective, I should say." Grimshaw chuckled, then sighed. He looked at his cluttered workspace, at the array of jars and potions, each holding the promise of health or the potential for havoc. He understood in those quiet moments that his role was not just to alleviate suffering, but to navigate the delicate balance of human need and human weakness. The cup, whether filled with small beer, potent wine, or his own dubious concoctions, was a powerful tool, a mirror reflecting both the resilience and the vulnerability of the medieval soul. It offered hope, it promised health, and sometimes it invited its own quiet brand of chaos. But in every sip, in every shared moment, in every sleepy sigh, lay a story waiting to be told, a human truth waiting to be unveiled. And as the evening drew in, casting long, contemplative shadows across his humble dwelling, Grimshaw, the physician of intoxication, found his own peace, knowing that even in the blur of a medicated slumber, there was always a profound truth to be found. The cup's journey, however, is far from over. From the shadowed quiet of the physician's dwelling, our path now leads to the vast, sun-drenched fields where survival itself often hinged on the humble brew, and where water, paradoxically, was often more of a hazard than a hearty pint. Here, in the relentless rhythm of daily toil, a very different kind of story about the cup unfolds, one born from the very dawn of subsistence.
From the shadowed quiet of Master Grimshaw's apothecary, where the cup offered a bittersweet solace to the ailing soul, our path now leads to a place far less confined, yet infinitely more demanding. Prepare yourself, for you will find yourself standing amidst endless barley fields, stretching out to meet the horizon like a vast, golden ocean under the benevolent yet scorching medieval sun. The air here hums with the buzzing of unseen insects, and you can almost taste the damp, fertile scent of earth rising from the very soil beneath your feet. This is the heartland of life, dear listener, where existence is measured not in scholarly tones or medicinal concoctions, but in the relentless rhythm of the seasons and the sweat on a farmer's brow. Here, in this sun-drenched expanse, you will meet Ella and her young son, Finn.
Their lives, tied intrinsically to the land, are a testament to grit and unwavering endurance. The medieval peasant's life, let me tell you, was harsher than you could possibly imagine. Forget your modern conveniences, your filtered water, your readily available painkillers. In this era, the very act of quenching your thirst was a gamble, a roll of the dice with destiny, where drinking water was often less a source of hydration and more a potential death trap. Rivers, streams, even village wells, they were the plumbing system, the laundry facility, and, quite frankly, the medieval garbage disposal all rolled into one. Unseen terrors, silent and microscopic, lurked in every droplet, ready to wage war on your unsuspecting insides. A sip of seemingly clear water could lead to a swift, agonizing descent into dysentery, a malady that would make you intimately familiar with every single plank of your humble bed. For Ilara and Finn, therefore, the concept of water being more dangerous than wine was not some quaint saying. It was a daily, terrifying truth. Their salvation, their very liquid bread, lay not in the pristine purity we now crave, but in the humble, bubbling, miraculously safe elixir known as small beer. Oh no, this was small beer, a beverage so modest in its alcoholic ambitions, barely 1 or 2%, mind you, that it was consumed by literally everyone, from the tiniest tot wobbling on uncertain legs, to the gruffest knight, to the most pious monk. We'll get to him later, trust me. Small beer was the undisputed champion of hydration. It was safer than river water, cleaner than well water, and far more reliable than prayers to ward off invisible tummy goblins. It wasn't a choice, it was survival. It was sustenance. It was, quite literally, their liquid insurance policy against an invisible army of stomach-wrenching microbes. And how did this liquid gold come to be? In homes like Ilara's, brewing was as common, as essential as baking bread. In fact, the two were often intertwined, using similar grains and processes. You'll observe Ilara now, her movements practiced and economical, as she begins her simple yet vital home brewing ritual. It's not a grand industrial operation, but a quiet, rhythmic dance. First, she would steep the malted barley in hot water, transforming the starch into sugars, a process known as mashing. The sweet, earthy aroma would fill their small, single-room dwelling, a comforting scent that spoke of nourishment and the promise of tomorrow. This sugary liquid, the wort, would then be boiled, a crucial step that killed off any rogue nasties. Finally, the magic ingredient, yeast, a small lump saved from the previous batch, carefully nurtured like a precious jewel, would be introduced, beginning the slow, wondrous alchemy of fermentation. The gentle gurgle of the fermenting brew, a soft, bubbling whisper from the corner of their hut, was the most reassuring lullaby a peasant family could hear. It was a taste of warmth, a fragrance of peace, a quiet anchor in their small, often tumultuous world. Picture Ilara and Finn now, working beneath the relentless medieval sun. The air shimmers above the ripening barley, the heat pressing down like an invisible hand. You can almost feel the bone-deep fatigue that settles in after a long day of stooping, bending, and hauling. Their muscles ache with the satisfying protest of honest labor, but also with the creeping exhaustion that threatened to pull them under. Their throats, parched from the dry, relentless wind that sweeps across the fields, cry out for solace. This isn't the dramatic thirst of a desert wanderer. It's the constant, nagging ache of a body pushed to its limits. Then, at midday, comes the moment of quiet reprieve. Ilara would unearth a small, earthenware jug, still cool from the earth. With a practiced hand, she'd pour the amber liquid into 2 simple wooden cups. For Finn, barely old enough to wield a hoe properly, the small beer wasn't just a drink, it was his midday energy boost, his afternoon pick-me-up. He'd tilt his head back, gulping it down, the low alcohol brew washing away the dust and the dryness. And as he drank, you'd see it, a new spark igniting in his young eyes, a flicker of renewed vigor that mirrored a profound, unspoken hope in Ilara's heart. With each sip Finn took, Ilara didn't just see a boy rehydrating. She saw a future. She saw the continuation of their lineage, the unbroken chain of life. That simple, unglamorous cup of small beer wasn't just liquid. It was a daily affirmation, a silent prayer for a tomorrow where the fields would yield their bounty and their small lives would endure. It was the humble, gritty embodiment of hope in a world that often seemed intent on crushing it. This wasn't the grand, sweeping hope of kings and conquerors, but the tenacious, everyday hope of survival, nurtured by the simple miracle of fermentation. Consider, if you will, the sheer practical genius of it all. While the more affluent sought cures for their various humors, the peasant simply needed to not die from drinking water. Small beer provided that fundamental safety net. And it wasn't just safe, it provided calories. In a time when food was scarce and hard-won, every ounce of sustenance counted. This liquid bread truly lived up to its name, offering a modicum of energy to fuel their back-breaking labor. It was an ingenious, if accidental, solution to a massive public health problem that medieval people couldn't even name. They just knew that the stuff brewed from grain made them feel better, and crucially, didn't make them vomit up their entrails. Sometimes a small humorous incident would break the monotony of their toil. One scorching afternoon, Ilara, feeling the bone-deep weariness, decided to try a new trick she'd heard from a traveling peddler to make her small beer extra refreshing. She'd added a tiny pinch of a strange aromatic spice, hoping for a burst of invigorating flavor. Instead, when Finn took his midday swig, his eyes widened, then crossed dramatically. He clapped a hand to his mouth, not in disgust, but in sheer, bewildered surprise. "Mother," he croaked, his voice muffled, "this tastes like a dragon sneezed into it." Ilara, tasting it herself, quickly realized her culinary misadventure. The spice, meant for savory dishes, had turned her modest brew into something akin to fiery mouthwash. They both dissolved into giggles, the unexpected burst of humor, a welcome relief from the relentless sun. Even the most essential of daily rituals could offer a moment of light-hearted absurdity. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the vast sky in hues of fiery orange and soft violet, imagine yourself there, dear listener, truly immersed in the scene. Feel the warmth of the setting sun on your skin, the subtle ache in your muscles from a day of vicarious labor. Now picture yourself raising that simple wooden cup of small beer to your lips, Feel the coolness of the vessel, the earthy, slightly sweet taste of the brew. As the warmth spreads through you, feel your very own muscles gradually relaxing, the tension of the day beginning to melt away. There's a profound, almost spiritual sense of serenity that settles over you, a deep, quiet contentment, knowing that even in the harsh realities of medieval survival, there was always this humble, dependable source of energy, a small wellspring of hope to sustain life day after weary day. The peasant's cup, then, was not about revelry or luxury. It was about raw, unvarnished survival. It was the daily ritual that kept starvation and disease at bay, a symbol of resilience and the quiet dignity of enduring. But the story of the cup is far more multifaceted than even the life-giving small beer. For beyond the fields and the humble dwellings, in stone structures soaring towards the heavens, another kind of brewing magic was at play, tied not just to the body's health, but to the very soul and to an unexpected source of power and influence. Prepare yourself, for our next journey takes us into the hallowed, often mysterious walls of the medieval monastery, where the sacred and the suds converged in a most divine fashion. Imagine, if you dare, a world bathed in the ethereal glow of stained glass windows, where silence is a symphony and ancient stones whisper secrets of centuries past. You've journeyed with me from the practical, earthy survival of the peasant's small beer and the bittersweet solace of the physician's medicinal cup. Now we stand before the colossal, weathered gates of a medieval monastery. But here's the twist, the little secret whispered on the wind. These bastions of piety, these solemn fortresses of faith, harbored a hidden indulgence, a deliciously divine paradox. What if I told you that within these very walls, consecrated to prayer and ascetic living, flowed not just holy water, but some of the finest, most robust, and, frankly, most intoxicatingly good beer in all the land? Are you curious yet? Ready to unveil a secret history far richer than any sermon? Step through the massive, creaking oak doors, if you please. The air immediately shifts. It's cooler here, dense with the scent of old parchment, beeswax from countless candles, and something else, something rich, malty, and profoundly comforting, a scent that hints at bubbling vats and industrious hands. You've landed squarely in the heart of a medieval monastic brewhouse, a place where devotion met fermentation in a most surprising and utterly delicious embrace. You see, unlike the humble, everyday small beer that kept our peasant friends from dying of dysentery, a truly noble purpose, don't get me wrong, the monastic brew was a different beast altogether. This wasn't merely hydration, it was liquid devotion. It was a work of art, a sacred endeavor, brewed with a painstaking care that bordered on the divine, a meticulousness that might even make the most fastidious modern craft brewer nod in silent approval. Here, in the hallowed quiet, beer was not just a drink, it was a testament to patience, a symbol of perseverance, and, dare I say, a rather delightful tool for spiritual enlightenment. Meet Brother Thomas, if you will. His back is slightly stooped from years hunched over illuminated manuscripts. his hands gnarled from tending both holy scriptures and herb gardens. Yet watch him now as he moves with a surprising, almost balletic delicacy amidst the colossal wooden vats. He's supervising the brewing process, a task he approaches with the solemnity of a liturgical rite. The atmosphere is one of profound tranquility. There are no boisterous shouts here like at Isolde's bustling inn, no weary sighs of back-breaking labor like in Elara's fields. Here the silence is broken only by the gentle lapping of liquid, the soft hiss of steam escaping a boiling copper kettle, and the occasional murmured Latin prayer barely audible above the gentle hum of fermentation. It's as if the very ale itself is humming a Gregorian chant. Every single step, from the moment the malted barley arrives, often grown on the monastery's own meticulously managed lands, a testament to their self-sufficiency, to the final slow fermentation, is performed with a meticulous precision that borders on ritual. Can you picture it? The careful steeping of the grains, transforming starches into sweet sugars, the precise boiling of the wort, a crucial step that rendered the liquid sterile long before anyone even dreamed of germ theory. And then the introduction of the yeast, carefully cultivated from batch to batch, a living, breathing miracle handed down through generations of monastic brewers. The air in this brewhouse, dear friend, isn't just thick with aroma. It's dense with an almost palpable reverence, a fragrance so pure and inviting it smells less like a beverage and more like a silent, aromatic hymn. This wasn't just brewing. This was an act of devotion, a liquid prayer rising to the heavens. Now, why, you might ask, would these paragons of piety spend so much time perfecting a brew when they were supposed to be fasting and praying? Ah, dear skeptic, therein lies a delicious twist. For the monks, locked away from the tumultuous world in their pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, this beer was their unsung hero during long days of rigorous observance. It wasn't about getting tipsy, it was about sustaining them. This beer, often richer and stronger than common ale, was their vital source of calories and nutrients during severe fasts, a way to keep their bodies warm during the biting chill of a winter's night vigil in an unheated scriptorium, and a means to fend off the creeping fatigue that could lead to spiritual distraction. It literally nourished their lean bodies, yes, but it was also, crucially, a silent partner in their quest for spiritual clarity. Imagine Brother Thomas hunched over an ancient, flickering manuscript, the words of the saints blurring before his weary eyes. A sip of the monastery's fortifying brew, perhaps a potent double bock, and suddenly the fatigue lessens. His mind, once clouded, becomes sharper. The intricate theological arguments begin to weave themselves into a tapestry of understanding. This wasn't just physical sustenance. It was the health of the soul, nurtured by the carefully crafted brew that aided both physical endurance and a profound mental focus. Some might even whisper that the visions some monks claimed to experience weren't purely divine inspiration, but perhaps a delightful synergy of deep contemplation and a particularly strong batch of Abbey ale. A subtle twist, wouldn't you agree, on the path to enlightenment? But the influence of monastic brewing extended far beyond the cloistered walls, reaching out like invisible tendrils of power. These monasteries were not merely spiritual centers.
They were economic powerhouses, beacons of learning, and often havens of sophisticated craftsmanship. Their beer, meticulously made and often of vastly superior quality to anything found outside, became a valuable commodity. It wasn't just for the monks. It was used to entertain visiting dignitaries, to reward loyal patrons, and, crucially, to distribute as charity to the poor who gathered at the monastery gates. Giving away ale was a profound act of Christian benevolence, a practical expression of faith that also subtly reinforced the monastery's position as a vital, benevolent force in the community. It was the ultimate soft power, brewed one barrel at a time.
This, my friend, was the monastery's hidden power, a silent, liquid authority. While kings wielded swords and nobles controlled vast swaths of land, the monasteries held a different kind of sway: the power of knowledge, the power of spiritual authority, and, rather deliciously, the power of exceptional beer. When a local lord, perhaps Lord Valerius, a man whose girth suggested a fondness for earthly delights, arrived seeking counsel, or perhaps just refuge from a particularly nasty bout of gout, he would invariably be offered the monastery's finest brew. This wasn't just hospitality, it was a subtle act of political maneuvering. A lord, beholden to the monastery for their hospitality and their medicinal brews, was less likely to challenge their authority or encroach upon their lands. The monastery's beer was a symbol of their immense prestige, their trustworthiness, and a soft, pervasive power that permeated the entire region. It fostered a deep sense of loyalty and obligation, a network of influence woven not with steel, but with amber liquid. Here's another intriguing observation, a subtle twist on the theme of havoc we've explored. One crisp autumn evening, Lord Valerius, looking rather flushed than pious, was indeed a guest at the monastery. He sat in the refectory, feasting on roasted meats, and, naturally, partaking liberally of Brother Thomas's celebrated brew. As the hours wore on, Valerius's usually stern countenance softened, his laughter growing louder, his pronouncements more boisterous. He began to boast of conquests, real and imagined, of his boundless wealth, and of the many grand ventures he planned. He was clearly succumbing to the effects of the potent monastic brew, his tongue loosened, his inhibitions unwound. Brother Thomas, serving in the refectory, observed him quietly. There was no harsh judgment in his gaze, no disapproving frown. Instead, a deep, almost melancholic understanding settled over his features. He simply saw a man, powerful yet vulnerable, seeking solace in the cup, just as the monks themselves did, though perhaps for different reasons. Thomas often contemplated the inherent weakness of human beings, a universal truth that transcended social standing. Whether it was a peasant seeking oblivion from toil, a physician battling his own frailties, or a lord seeking escape from the pressures of his station, the cup offered a path. The subtle havoc here wasn't violence, but a quiet dependency, a gentle erosion of self-control cloaked in the guise of dignified revelry. Thomas knew that the very same brew that aided a monk's spiritual focus could lead a lord into a realm of blissful, yet ultimately fleeting, self-delusion. It was a poignant reminder that even the most powerful among us were, in their raw humanity, simply seeking comfort, however temporary, from the burdens of their existence. This wasn't a flaw in the beer, but a reflection of humanity's enduring, often humorous, struggle with itself. The monastery's influence wasn't always so overtly transactional. Sometimes it was simply about reputation, a quiet aura of sanctity and expertise. A village plagued by a mysterious illness might turn to the monks not just for prayers, but for their renowned herbal remedies, often dissolved in potent spirits. A traveler, lost and disoriented, would seek out the monastery, knowing they would find not just shelter, but a cup of their fortifying ale, a symbol of hope and recovery in a bewildering world. The monks, for their part, took their responsibility seriously. Their knowledge of herbs passed down through generations, combined with the sterile, for the time, conditions of their brewing, made their products uniquely effective. This reputation for purity and efficacy wasn't just good for their souls, it was good for their standing, amplifying their hidden power far beyond the walls of their abbey. Their influence was a quiet current, flowing through the arteries of society, reaching places neither sword nor gold could easily conquer. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, painting the stone floors in vibrant hues, Brother Thomas would often retreat to the quiet solitude of the brewing cellar. The air there was perpetually cool, damp, and redolent with the deep yeasty aroma of fermentation. He would sit, not unlike Isolde at her hearth, in quiet contemplation, a simple wooden cup of their own small beer in his hand. This wasn't a drink for pleasure or escape, but for reflection. He'd think of the cycles of brewing, so much like the cycles of life itself. The humble grain, transformed by heat and water, purified by fermentation, becoming something new and sustaining. He pondered the monastery's dual role, a bastion of faith and a wellspring of physical and spiritual nourishment. The monks, in their pursuit of God, had inadvertently become masters of a very earthly craft, one that brought comfort, health, and a peculiar form of power to a world often devoid of all three. He understood that the sanctity of their lives was intertwined with the very physicality of their brew. It kept them alive, kept them focused, and kept the world connected to their spiritual wisdom. This wasn't a sad loneliness, but a profound, almost mystical connection to his purpose. In the quiet hum of the fermenting vats, Brother Thomas found not just peace, but a deep sense of belonging, a profound understanding of the sacred balance between the earthly and the divine. And with that final reflective sip, dear listener, we step quietly out of the monastic halls, leaving Brother Thomas to his contemplation. We've seen the cup as a tool of spiritual sustenance and subtle power, a world away from the desperate survival of the peasant. But what happens when the cup leaves the solemn quiet of the monastery and bursts into the vibrant, often unruly heart of village social life? Where does the hope, the health, and the havoc of the cup truly collide in a whirlwind of gossip, laughter, and perhaps a brawl or two, all under the watchful yet often inebriated eyes of an entire community? Prepare yourself, for our next destination is the very beating heart of the community, the bustling, raucous, and utterly vital village tavern. Forget, for a moment, the quiet reverence of the monastery's brewing cells and the stoic endurance of the peasants' fields. Shake off the lingering sense of sacred herbs and damp earth, because now, dear listener, we're about to plunge headfirst into the very heart, the pulsating, often raucous, and utterly indispensable soul of medieval life, the village tavern. What if I told you that this seemingly simple establishment, often just a smoky, bustling room, was more than just a place to quench a thirst? What if it was the beating drum of the community, a crucible where destinies were forged, secrets were spilled, and the very essence of human hope and havoc clashed and coalesced in a swirling, intoxicating dance? Prepare to be surprised, for the true spirit of the Middle Ages, in all its messy, magnificent glory, lives here, within these very walls. You will step, perhaps a little tentatively at first, into the clamorous embrace of a village tavern. The air here is a thick, fragrant tapestry woven from wood smoke curling lazily from the hearth, the earthy aroma of spilled ale, and the undeniable, vibrant scent of humanity. It's a symphony of sound, the clatter of pewter tankards on rough-hewn tables, the boisterous laughter of a tale being told, the murmur of hushed confessions, and yes, the occasional, slightly off-key burst of a bawdy song. This isn't just a drinking hole. This is the medieval internet, the local gossip column, the impromptu employment agency, and the community's emotional pressure cooker, all rolled into one gloriously chaotic package. Here, in this crucible of conviviality, every social stratum mingled, albeit sometimes uneasily. The prosperous merchant, his purse heavy with coin, might share a bench with a weary journeyman, his hands calloused from the road. The local tailor would swap news with the blacksmith, their voices rising above the din. And, inevitably, you'd find young hopefuls like Osric, a lad barely past his whiskers, eyes alight with dreams as expansive as the sky, yet as fragile as spun sugar. Osric, with a hopeful glint in his eye and a few coppers clutched tight in his hand, sought not just the taste of ale, but a glimpse of his future within each bubbling draught. He was searching for hope, for opportunity, for a friendly face, all poured into a simple wooden cup. But here's the insidious whisper, the subtle, sobering truth. It was also in this very space, where hopes floated like foam on a fresh pint, that the intoxicating embrace of ale could turn joy into sudden, clumsy havoc. Like a truly awkward, stumbling dance amidst the cramped tables, threatening to upset more than just a few tankards. The tavern, you see, was the medieval town square, minus the mud. It was where news, both good and gloriously exaggerated, traveled faster than a frightened hare. "Did you hear?" someone might bellow, their voice amplified by ale and enthusiasm. "The king's levied a new tax on, well, on everything," or whispered in a hushed corner. "Young Agnes and Thomas seen holding hands behind the mill last night." Every transaction, every piece of gossip, every whispered promise flowed through these doors. And amidst this vibrant tapestry of life, the music would swell and ebb. Sometimes it was the melancholic, almost mournful strains of a lone lute, its notes weaving through the smoke-filled air, pulling at the heartstrings. Other times, a fiddler,
his bow scratching a lively jig, would set feet tapping under the tables, inspiring impromptu, if somewhat clumsy, dances. This wasn't choreographed perfection. It was the raw, unpolished soundtrack of communal existence, a swirling medley of human voices and simple melodies that created a harmonious chaos, a true symphony of everyday life. But where there are strong opinions and even stronger brews, Havoc is an uninvited yet almost inevitable guest. It wasn't always grand, cinematic brawls, mind you. Sometimes it was far more artistic. Imagine, if you will, a sudden resounding crash. Not the clang of steel, but the unmistakable splintering sound of a wooden chair meeting the floor, followed by a startled gasp, then a collective "ooh" that rippled through the crowd. This wouldn't be a brutal, bloody fight, but more of a clumsy, almost theatrical ballet of flailing limbs and gentle shoves. Two farmers, perhaps, arguing over the price of a cow or the merits of rye versus barley. Their voices would rise, tempers would fray, and suddenly a push would be exchanged, escalating into a series of awkward shoves and stumbles, like a badly choreographed dance routine where everyone was just a little bit off balance. They'd trip over stray legs, collide with unsuspecting patrons, and send a few tankards of precious ale sloshing precariously. It was loud, it was messy, but rarely truly violent. More often than not, it ended with one of them sprawling comically in the straw, amidst a chorus of good-natured jeers and laughter as others rushed to pull them apart, more out of concern for spilled ale than shattered bones.
And who, you might ask, presided over the simmering cauldron of human emotion? The tavern keeper, of course. Meet Thobald, a man whose face, perpetually set in a weary but knowing expression, was a living tapestry of 1,000 late nights. He stood behind his scarred wooden counter, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel witnessing the eternal comedy of human nature. When the chair crashed, when the voices rose, Thobald merely blinked, his eyes, distant and filled with the wisdom of countless similar scenes, held no surprise. A slow, deep sigh would escape his lips, a sound as profound and resigned as the wind sighing through bare branches on a winter's night. He'd seen it all before. He knew that the line between shared joy and simmering frustration, between heartfelt camaraderie and drunken bluster, was thinner than the foam on his freshest pint. He was the calm eye in the center of the storm, the unspoken governor of a realm where emotions ran as freely as the ale. And then there was Osric, our hopeful young man. He'd arrive at the tavern, his eyes wide with anticipation. Perhaps a small bundle of goods he hoped to sell, or a letter he yearned to have read to him. He'd buy a pint, joining the jovial throng, absorbing the gossip, perhaps even daring to speak to a pretty girl. For a while, the ale would seem to open doors, to loosen his tongue, to make his dreams feel tantalizingly within reach. He'd find a fleeting confidence, a temporary camaraderie. But as the hours wore on and the tankards emptied, a subtle shift would occur. The laughter might turn hollow. The hopes, once so vibrant, would begin to fray around the edges. Osric would find himself looking down at his empty cup, a profound sadness settling in his chest. Why, he would ponder, did people seek solace in the brew, only to sometimes lose the very peace they sought? The camaraderie, so loud and vibrant moments ago, felt suddenly distant, an illusion fading with the last drop. The tavern, once a beacon of hope, could, under the shroud of too much ale, become a mirror reflecting a quiet, almost melancholic sense of unfulfillment. It was a sobering realization, a subtle twist of the heart. The very thing that promised to lift spirits could, if unchecked, leave them adrift. This wasn't always a dramatic downfall, mind you. Often it was simply a quiet dissolution of the night's magic. The loud boasts of bravery turned into mumbled regrets. The declarations of undying love dissolved into awkward silences. The hopes, once so brightly lit by the glow of the firelight, flickered and died, leaving behind only the cold ashes of what might have been. The tavern, then, wasn't just a place of joy and occasional chaos. It was a stage where the human drama, in all its hopeful, hilarious, and sometimes heartbreaking forms, played out nightly. As the late hours approached and the flickering candlelight began to wane, the tavern would slowly empty. The boisterous laughter would fade to quiet murmurs, then to the creak of the door as the last patron stumbled out into the cool, silent night. Only Thobald would remain, methodically wiping down his counter, stacking tankards, his face still holding that distant, knowing look. He'd seen the hopes bloom and the havoc erupt, the joys celebrated and the sorrows drowned. He understood, perhaps better than anyone else, the delicate dance between these opposing forces, the eternal ebb and flow of human emotion that played out nightly in his humble establishment. The village tavern, then, was the very heart of the community, where every hope, every health, and every potential for havoc converged in a swirling, intoxicating dance of everyday life. It was a place of connection, of fleeting joys, and of lessons learned, sometimes the hard way, about the true nature of the cup. But as the tavern falls silent, and the last embers of the fire glow faintly, another kind of gathering is taking shape, far from the village square and the boisterous crowds. A realm where the cup takes on a wholly different meaning, imbued with status, ceremony, and the subtle yet undeniable language of power. Where the finest wines, not mere ales, define not just a moment, but an entire social order. Prepare yourself, for our next journey takes us into the gilded halls of the nobility, where the clinking of glasses echoes with whispers of courtly intrigue and the delicate art of diplomacy. Leave behind the humble tavern's earthy chaos and shed any lingering scent of peasant small beer, because now we ascend. Imagine scaling ancient winding staircases, each step echoing with the ghosts of forgotten grandeur, until you emerge into a world bathed in an altogether different kind of light. What if I told you that in the gilded halls of medieval nobility, where silken gowns swished and jewels caught the candlelight, the simple act of raising a cup wasn't just about drinking, but about a delicate, elaborate dance of power, prestige, and profoundly elegant indiscretion? Are you intrigued? ready to witness a havoc so refined, so exquisitely camouflaged by luxury that it takes a keen eye to even spot it? Prepared to be astonished by the secrets held within a crystal goblet? You will find yourself, quite suddenly, standing amidst a truly dazzling spectacle, a grand feast in a lord's sprawling great hall. The air here isn't thick with wood smoke, but with the heady perfume of roasted meats, exotic spices, and the rich, complex bouquet of aged wine. 1,000 candles flicker, their golden flames dancing across polished silver platters, glinting off the intricate embroidery of silken tunics, and most captivatingly, sparkling within the delicate curves of exquisite glass goblets. This is the world of the medieval aristocracy, a realm where every gesture is a statement, every garment a declaration, and where wine, O sweet nectar of the gods, is not merely a beverage, but an indispensable symbol of status, power, and perhaps a convenient veil for certain proclivities. In this opulent theater, where the stakes were often as high as the ceilings, getting drunk was not only common, it was, in many circles, practically expected. The trick, however, lay in doing it with an almost theatrical grace. No sprawling in the straw here, no clumsy fisticuffs over a stray cow. Here, inebriation was an art form, a delicate ballet of slurred witticisms and gracefully stifled yawns. You will witness these lavish feasts unfold, lavish symphonies of consumption, where oaths of loyalty were whispered over clinking glasses, where intricate conspiracies were woven between courses, and where havoc, oh yes, it was always present, never dared to erupt into overt violence. Instead, it lurked just beneath the shimmering surface of sophistication, revealing itself only through a telltale languor in the eyes, a whisper too loud, a smile too fixed, or a secret so thinly veiled it might as well have been shouted from the battlements. The very atmosphere of this feast is a soft, opulent current, a gentle tide of luxury and glamour. The soft glow of candlelight washes over the scene, creating a dreamlike haze where every face seems softer, every smile more alluring. The strains of a lute, accompanied by a gentle harp, weave intricate melodies through the space, a soothing backdrop to the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of delicate cutlery. The air itself is perfumed, not with the simple scent of fermented grain, but with the rich, intoxicating aroma of fine wine, mingling with the earthy musk of roasted boar and the sweet tang of spiced fruit. It's a sensory feast before a single bite is taken, an experience designed to lull you into a state of blissful, luxurious surrender. Watch them, the lords and ladies, each holding their chosen vessel. For the nobility, the cup wasn't just a container for wine, it was a potent symbol of their very status. See that intricately carved silver chalice gleaming under the candlelight? That belongs to the Duke, a man whose lineage is as ancient as the oak trees in his vast hunting grounds. Observe the delicate, almost impossibly thin glass goblet imported from Venice, clutched in the Countess's slender fingers. Each sip from such a vessel was a quiet declaration of wealth, of taste, of power. The way they raised their cups, the supple arc of their wrists, the precise moment they offered a toast were not random gestures, but carefully choreographed movements in a grand theater of social dominance. A common wooden tankard in these halls? Unthinkable. A pewter mug? Perhaps for the servants, if they were lucky. Here, the cup itself spoke volumes, a silent herald of one's place in the rigid hierarchy. Now, prepare for a moment of delightful, stylized havoc. Observe Sir Gareth, a knight renowned more for his boisterous charm than his delicate table manners. Engaged in a particularly passionate monologue about his recent hunting exploits, likely exaggerated, of course. He gesticulates wildly, his arms sweeping across the table with the enthusiasm of a medieval windmill. And then, splash! A shimmering cascade of ruby-red wine, a precious vintage imported from Gascony, arcs gracefully through the air before landing with a rather magnificent plop right onto the pristine white lace ruff of the Baroness.
It's not a violent outburst, no, that would be terribly uncouth. Instead, it's an incident of exquisitely graceful clumsiness. The Baroness, a woman whose composure was legendary, merely lets out a tiny, almost imperceptible gasp. Her eyes, however, flash with a momentary spark that could curdle milk. Countess Isolde, seated nearby, not that Isolde, mind you, but a noblewoman of the same venerable name, merely offers a barely perceptible sigh, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips, as if to say, "Ah, Gareth, always Gareth." It's an anticipated imperfection, a delightful breach of decorum that adds a dash of human imperfection to the otherwise flawless tableau. No harsh words are exchanged, no fists clenched. Just a hushed flurry of servants with linen cloths and an unspoken understanding that sometimes even the most elegant of gatherings cannot entirely escape the delightful, if slightly inconvenient, caprices of human nature, or too much wine. As the evening deepened and the wine continued to flow, conversations would shift, becoming more intimate, more revealing. You'd overhear whispers of arranged marriages, of disputed lands, of hushed scandals barely concealed beneath layers of silk and bravado. And then there was the old Earl, a man whose glory days were clearly behind him, yet whose eyes, when clouded by enough wine, would glow with the faded fire of youth. He would lean forward, his voice thick with unfulfilled longing, confessing to you, the unseen observer, his grand vain hopes. He'd speak of vast, glorious conquests he swore he would lead, of a triumphant return to a bygone era of unparalleled valor, of powerful alliances he would forge, if only the world hadn't become so sober. His dreams of glory, of power reclaimed, of a magnificent legacy now existed only within the amber depths of his goblet, fragile illusions sustained by the intoxicating spirits. It was a poignant, almost heartbreaking twist on hope, seeing it reduced to a phantom, shimmering beautifully but impossibly in the wine's reflection. The power of the cup in these noble circles was not just in its content, but in its presentation, its ritual. The formal toasts, the specific order of drinking, the way a host would personally fill a guest's cup, each gesture reinforced the intricate web of feudal loyalty and obligation.
To refuse a toast was an insult. To offer one was a sign of respect. The very act of sharing wine became a social contract, binding people together, or, if misinterpreted, tearing them apart in a delicate dance of perceived slights. The clinking of glasses wasn't just a pleasant sound, it was the soft, rhythmic heartbeat of an entire social order, a constant reminder of who you were and where you stood. As the night wore on, the refined havoc might manifest in other ways. Perhaps a perfectly respectable lord would begin to recite incredibly bad poetry, convinced he was a modern Virgil. Or a demure lady might suddenly unleash a torrent of scandalous gossip she'd been hoarding for months, her usually tightly controlled tongue finally loosened by the vintage. No violent clashes, no vulgar displays, but a subtle unraveling of carefully constructed facades, a delightful peek behind the silken curtain of aristocratic etiquette. It was the human element, bubbling up like the effervescence in a freshly poured glass, reminding everyone that, even under the weight of powdered wigs and rigid etiquette, they were still, fundamentally, just people enjoying, or perhaps over-enjoying, a good drink. As the feast finally began to wind down, the candles burning low, their flames casting long, dancing shadows across the tapestries, the atmosphere softened. The boisterous laughter mellowed into contented sighs, the grand pronouncements into sleepy murmurs. The remnants of the magnificent meal lay scattered, a testament to prodigious consumption. The crystal goblets, once gleaming, now stood half empty, catching the dying light, each one holding not just the last drops of wine, but the lingering echoes of promises, plots, and poignant forgotten dreams. The noble feast, then, was a universe unto itself, where the cup was transformed from a tool of survival or healing into a gleaming instrument of status, a catalyst for both grand aspirations and exquisitely veiled chaos. It was a realm where hope could become a beautiful illusion and havoc a gracefully executed stumble. But as the last noble departs, their carriage wheels crunching softly on the gravel, our journey continues. We have seen the cup in the alewife's hearth, the physician's dwelling, the peasant's field, and the monastery's sacred halls. Now we must turn our gaze to a darker, more desperate corner of medieval society, a place where the cup offers not status or solace, but a fleeting, almost desperate escape from a harsh, unforgiving reality. Prepare yourself, for our next destination is the harrowing, yet deeply human world of the medieval dungeon, where the cup sometimes offered the only true freedom, the freedom of oblivion. You've witnessed the cup's journey through the alewife's welcoming hearth, the physician's shadowed haven, the peasant's sun-drenched fields, and the noble's gilded hall. Each setting, a different facet of medieval life, a different role for the potent brew. But now, dear listener, we step into a space where the merriment often ends and the consequences begin. Imagine, if you will, the bustling village square on a market day, usually a vibrant tapestry of commerce and chatter. But today, a hush has fallen. A small crowd has gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity, disapproval, and a hint of morbid fascination. What if I told you that in this seemingly ordinary tableau, a drama of justice, or perhaps injustice, is about to unfold, all thanks to the humble yet powerful cup? Are you prepared to peek behind the curtain of medieval law, where the scales of justice often tipped in unexpected directions, and where the most embarrassing secrets weren't buried but publicly displayed? Lean in close. The court is in session. You will find yourself standing before a makeshift tribunal. Mayor Finch, a man whose jowls seem perpetually set in a grim, disapproving frown, presides with an air of immense self-importance. His eyes, small and beady, dart across the crowd, relishing the power of his position. And before him, a figure of profound discomfort, Gareth. Ah, Gareth, not the elegant Sir Gareth of the spilt wine, but a different Gareth, a common villager whose life has just taken an unfortunate tumble, courtesy of too many trips to the tavern. He stands there, shoulders slumped, his face a rather unhealthy shade of mottled red, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps even wrestling a particularly grumpy dragon. In medieval society, dear friend, losing oneself to drink and causing a disturbance was not just a social faux pas. It was a bona fide havoc that society simply wouldn't tolerate. And the law, in its infinite wisdom and often brutal simplicity, was more than ready to apply some truly imaginative and often humiliating punishments. Public drunkenness wasn't just a hangover waiting to happen. It was a challenge to the established order, a breach of the king's peace, and an open invitation for the local authorities to demonstrate their creativity in law enforcement. You can almost feel the searing blush rising from Gareth's neck, creeping up to his ears as he stands there, a living, breathing testament to the perils of overindulgence, facing the silent yet palpable judgment of his entire community. The shame, dear listener, is a tangible thing, hotter than any summer sun. Let me paint the scene of Gareth's unfortunate misstep, not with violence, but with a touch of clumsy charm. It was late, the tavern was dim, and Gareth, having imbibed perhaps a few too many of the tavern's finest, decided it was time to make his grand exit. He swayed, he wobbled, a human pendulum counting down to disaster. With a lurch, he lurched not into a wall, but into poor old Mogg, who was simply trying to navigate her way home with a brimming basket of fresh vegetables. There was a sudden comical clatter of carrots, cabbages, and a particularly indignant turnip cascading across the cobbled street. It was less a brawl, more a vegetable-based avalanche, and it attracted the immediate, stern gaze of Mayor Finch, who just happened to be passing by, likely to enjoy a very sober nightcap. The chaos wasn't bloody, but it was certainly noisy, embarrassing, and undeniably public. And now Gareth stands before the mayor, the weight of his actions and the collective stare of the village pressing down on him. He feels the heat rising from his very soul, not from the lingering effects of the ale, but from a shame that burns hotter than any forge. It crawls up his neck, across his ears, searing his cheeks a mottled crimson. His eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, are downcast, fixed on the scuffed toes of his boots, as if the answers to life's great injustices might be found there. He wants the ground to swallow him whole, to magically transport him to a secluded corner of the universe where no one knows his name, let alone his unfortunate incident with Maud's prize-winning cabbages. This isn't just physical discomfort. This is the agonizing agony of social mortification, a punishment almost as potent as the stocks. But here is where the narrative takes a rather uncomfortable, yet historically accurate twist. As Mayor Finch thunders on about the sanctity of public order and the dangers of demon drink, a truth begins to dawn on you, starker than the morning light. You realize that in this medieval era, justice was often less about absolute fairness and more about flexibility. The law, it turns out, could be bent, sculpted, or even politely ignored, depending on whose hands were doing the bending. Gareth, a common villager, faced the full, unyielding force of the law for his vegetable-spilling mishap. But what if, instead of Gareth, it had been, say, Sir Reginald, a minor noble with powerful connections, who had committed a similar or even far worse offense? Well then, the mayor might suddenly develop a cough or find urgent business elsewhere. The punishment might involve a quiet word, a donation to the church, or perhaps being too unwell to attend the hearing at all. You see, the scales of justice in the Middle Ages were often weighted not by evidence, but by lineage, land, and the jingle of coins. The hope for true impartiality, for justice that was truly blind, was often a luxury reserved for the powerful, a fragile whisper for the weak. It was a bitter truth, a quiet commentary on the realities of power dynamics that even the most fervent sermons couldn't completely obscure. The law was a stern master for some, a polite acquaintance for others. Just as the mayor's pronouncements grow more severe, threatening Gareth with a public shaming in the stocks, a delightful medieval invention for ensuring maximum humiliation, a figure emerges from the edge of the crowd. She moves with a quiet dignity that parts the murmuring onlookers like a gentle tide. It is Dame Isolde, not the boisterous alewife whose spirit still resonates in every cheerful pint, but a different Dame Isolde, a woman of formidable reputation and gentle compassion, known throughout the village for her quiet wisdom and her unwavering support of those in need. Her eyes, clear and unwavering, meet Mayor Finch's, and for a fleeting moment, even the pompous mayor seems to falter. Her presence, a silent testament to her character and influence, is a powerful interjection. She doesn't shout, she doesn't demand. Instead, she speaks in a calm, clear voice, gently reminding the mayor of Gareth's usual diligence, his hard work in the fields, and perhaps, with a subtle glance at Gareth's still reddened face, the temporary nature of his affliction. She even offers to pay for Maud's ruined vegetables, not as an admission of guilt, but as an act of communal goodwill. It's a truly powerful moment, a subtle twist of mercy, a flicker of hope in an otherwise grim tableau of medieval justice. Her quiet authority, earned not through title, but through genuine kindness and unwavering integrity, cuts through the rigid formality, offering a rare glimpse of human understanding. She embodies the profound realization that compassion sometimes is the most potent form of justice. The mayor, caught off guard by such a graceful intervention, blusters for a moment, then, with an almost imperceptible nod, relents. Instead of the stocks, Gareth is given a lighter sentence, a small fine, a public apology to Maud, which, judging by his face, is punishment enough, and a solemn vow to abstain from strong ale for a week, a truly cruel and unusual punishment for a medieval man. Gareth, his shoulders still slumped, manages a weak nod of gratitude towards Dame Isolde, a silent promise to remember her kindness. The crowd disperses, murmuring about the unexpected turn of events, a blend of relief and disappointment that the public spectacle was cut short. As Gareth shuffles away, head still bowed in shame, you understand that this incident, while minor, illuminates a profound truth about the medieval world. The law, with its arbitrary punishments and its deference to status, was a constant, formidable presence, often a source of fear rather than comfort. But even within its rigid framework, sparks of humanity, acts of kindness, and the quiet interventions of compassionate souls could sometimes bend its unyielding will. The cup, then, was not just a source of pleasure or oblivion. It was also a witness to the profound inequalities of the age, and a catalyst for moments where the true nature of justice, or its absence, was starkly revealed. This experience shows us that the battle against Havoc was a constant one, fought not just in taverns, but in the very courtrooms of the day, with outcomes often decided by factors beyond mere guilt or innocence. But as the shadows lengthen across the village square and the echoes of Mayor Finch's pronouncements fade, our journey continues. We've seen the cup bring trouble, but what about its role in something far more clandestine, more dangerous, yet undeniably alluring? What about its place in the shadowy world of secrets, betrayal, and whispers of espionage? Prepare yourself, for our next destination is the hidden chambers of courtly intrigue, where the cup is not a symbol of status, but a silent co-conspirator, and where Havoc takes on a far more subtle and potentially dangerous form.
All right, brace yourself. We're leaving the shadowy, intrigue-laden halls of the nobility and the often somber courtrooms of medieval justice. Put away your silk gowns and your legal scrolls, because now we're about to plunge into a burst of pure, unadulterated joy, a riot of color, sound, and the most delightful kind of wholesome chaos. What if I told you that in the heart of the often harsh medieval year, there was a time, a sacred annual ritual, when the cup transformed from a mere vessel into a vibrant symbol of communal triumph, physical rejuvenation, and the sheer glorious power of human connection? Are you ready to dance, to sing, to truly feel the pulse of a community united by shared labor and, of course, shared libations? Then let us step, with a skip in our stride and a smile on our lips, into the Harvest Festival. You will immediately feel the electric hum of the Harvest Festival, a palpable buzz of excitement that electrifies the very air. The entire village, from the tiniest tot clinging to their mother's skirts to the most wizened elder, has converged to celebrate the miraculous bounty of a successful crop. Lanterns crafted from hollowed-out gourds and glowing with the soft, ethereal light of beeswax candles sway gently in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows on the eager faces below.
The air is a symphony of delightful sounds, the lively, infectious melodies of folk music played on fiddles, flutes, and hand drums, punctuated by bursts of laughter, the cheerful chatter of friends reuniting, and the rhythmic stomp of dancing feet. And the smells, the smells alone are a feast for the senses. The sweet, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, mingled with the savory scent of roasting meats, all underscored by the inviting, mellow fragrance of sweet, malty beer wafting from every corner. In this joyous crescendo of communal celebration, beer is not just a drink, it's the very lifeblood of the festivities. It's the essential fuel after months of back-breaking toil, the glorious lubricant for tired muscles and weary spirits. It's the catalyst for the heartwarming stories shared around crackling bonfires, the inspiration for impromptu songs that rise into the cool night air, and the irresistible impetus for the gentle, often slightly clumsy folk dances that weave through the throngs. You'll spot familiar faces in the jubilant crowd. There's Ilara, her face softer now, etched not with weariness, but with a quiet pride in her labors. And Finn, her son, taller now, his eyes bright with youthful energy as he chases his friends. And look, over by the largest bonfire, sharing a hearty laugh, is Ulsric, our hopeful young man from the tavern, his earlier shame seemingly washed away by the tide of collective joy. Together they share simple pleasures, feeling the profound recovery of their spirits and the undeniable strength of true community, a bond forged not only in shared hardships, but in shared jubilation. This isn't a frenzied, chaotic party, but a gentle, flowing river of communal joy and unity. It creates a vivid, heartwarming tapestry of life, vibrant yet profoundly peaceful. The music, the laughter, the shared food and drink, it all weaves together into a harmonious whole, a soothing balm for souls that have toiled relentlessly under the sun and endured the cold indifference of winter. This is a time when the entire village breathes a collective sigh of relief, of gratitude, and of pure, unadulterated happiness. And speaking of that liquid gold, the beer, here it truly shines as a catalyst for profound spiritual and emotional recovery. Think of it, after months of silence, broken only by the creak of the plow or the bleating of sheep, suddenly the air is alive with stories. Old man Tiber will lean in close, his voice raspy with age and emotion, recounting tales of legendary harvests from his youth, each story made richer and more vivid with every sip of ale. Young lovers, emboldened by the convivial spirit and a few gulps of courage, might exchange shy glances, perhaps even a whispered promise, as the soft, enchanting melodies of the lute gently urge their hearts together. And the dancing isn't about perfectly executed steps or grand choreographed movements. It's about spontaneous joy, bodies swaying and twirling, hands clapping in time, an effortless expression of pure, unbridled freedom. These simple acts, fueled by the amber liquid, bring a sense of profound release, a recovery of the spirit that recharges them for the long, lean months ahead. It's a collective exhale after holding their breath for a year, a communal sigh of contentment.
Now, a moment of profound beauty, a ritual as old as the earth itself. As the evening deepens, a hush falls over the merriment. The villagers gather, forming a great circle,
their faces illuminated by the flickering lanterns and the warm glow of the bonfires. With solemn reverence they raise their cups, not fine goblets, but humble wooden tankards and clay mugs, filled with the golden bounty of the season's brew. This is the offering of the harvest, a deeply ingrained ritual of gratitude. "To the Earth Mother!" a voice booms, rich with emotion. "To the spirits of the harvest!" another echoes. Everyone murmurs along, a quiet, almost sacred prayer of thanks to the very soil that nourished them, to the unpredictable whims of nature that granted them such abundance. It's a wordless plea, a heartfelt request for continued blessings in the seasons to come, a silent communal whisper of hope for future harvests. This isn't just drinking, it's a profound act of faith, a deep acknowledgement of their reliance on the natural world, a ritual that anchors them to the timeless cycles of life and death, planting and reaping. And then a moment, fleeting yet potent, that warms the very cockles of your heart. You see Ilara, her earlier weariness completely forgotten, being gently drawn into a folk dance. And her partner? None other than Osric, our young man from the tavern, his youthful vigor a stark contrast to her seasoned grace. They move together, not with practiced steps, but with an intuitive understanding born of shared humanity. There are no words exchanged, only the soft brush of hands, the subtle sway of bodies in rhythm with the music, and the warm, genuine smiles that pass between them. It's a silent conversation, a moment of unexpected, profound connection. A flicker of hope for connection, for mending, for a gentle, unspoken affection passes between them. It's a human twist, a gentle narrative curve that softens the edges of their earlier struggles. And let's not forget the culinary magic of these festivals. The beer wasn't just for drinking, oh no. It was a vital ingredient in the very heart of the feast, transforming humble ingredients into dishes fit for a king, or at least a very grateful peasant. Think of the rich, savory stews simmered for hours with dark ale, its malty notes deepening the flavors of root vegetables and tough cuts of meat, turning them into tender, soul-satisfying nourishment. Imagine the hearth-baked breads, brushed with ale before baking, developing a crisp golden crust and a subtle, yeasty aroma that made your stomach rumble in joyous anticipation. This wasn't just cooking. It was nutritional health on a grand scale, a culinary alchemy that turned simple fare into hearty, warming, and deeply satisfying sustenance. Each bite, each comforting gulp brought a sense of profound warmth and satiation, a feeling of being truly nourished, body and soul. As the moon climbs higher, casting its silvery glow over the still bustling village square, the energy of the festival begins its slow, gentle descent. The music softens, the laughter becomes more subdued, and the dances become less vigorous. People begin to drift towards their homes, their hearts full, their bodies weary, but content. They carry with them not just the lingering taste of ale and roasted meats, but a renewed spirit, a sense of belonging, and the quiet strength drawn from shared jubilation. This harvest festival reminds us that the cup, in its simplest form, can be a profound symbol of joy, connection, and communal strength. It transcends mere sustenance, becoming a catalyst for healing spiritual wounds, strengthening social bonds, and igniting the quiet flame of hope for the future. We've seen it bring pleasure, purpose, and even peril. But what happens when the very essence of the cup, the alcohol itself, becomes the subject of meticulous study, of scientific inquiry, of a pursuit for understanding that pushes beyond mere consumption? When the spirit of inquiry, fueled by the spirit of the drink, begins to unravel the very nature of this ancient liquid? Prepare yourself, for our final journey takes us into the burgeoning world of early science, where the cup is no longer just for drinking, but for dissecting, experimenting, and perhaps for discovering secrets that will change the world.
You've laughed with the alewife, witnessed the peasant's quiet hope, navigated the monastery's hidden power, danced at a harvest festival, and even sat through a comical, if unjust, medieval court. We've seen the cup bring joy, status, and sometimes a bit of charming havoc. But now, dear listener, prepare yourself, because we are about to step into a chapter cloaked in shadows, where the very air feels heavy, thick with unseen dread. What if I told you that in this moment, the cup, once a symbol of life and celebration, transforms into the poignant, desperate symbol of farewell, an offering of fleeting solace in the face of absolute, overwhelming despair? Are you brave enough to witness the quiet, heartbreaking dignity of humanity's last stand against an invisible enemy, where hope flickers like a dying ember and chaos descends not with a roar, but with a silent, chilling touch? You will feel it the moment you step into the village square. The vibrant energy of the harvest festival is a distant memory, replaced by a profound, suffocating silence. The usual bustling pathways are eerily empty, the market stalls deserted. Doors that once stood wide open in welcome are now grimly shut, their weathered wood seeming to stare out like sorrowful, weary eyes. The only sounds are the occasional weak cough echoing from within a shuttered home, or the distant, mournful tolling of a church bell, each chime a fresh stab to the heart. A cold, invisible fear, colder than any winter wind, snakes through every alleyway, seeping into every crack and crevice, chilling you to the very bone. The great pestilence, the dreaded Black Death, has descended like a vengeful spectre, sweeping across the land with a silent, relentless fury. It claims lives not by the dozens, but by the hundreds, then thousands, then unfathomable legions, leaving behind a trail of grief and desolation that stretches to the horizon. In this horrifying reality, where the Grim Reaper seems to have set up permanent residence, medicine, with its leeches and its herbal poultices, finds itself utterly, tragically powerless. The knowledge of centuries, the wisdom of Master Grimshaw himself, crumbles before this unseen foe. And in those final, agonizing moments, when all hope of healing has vanished like smoke in the wind, the cup, that familiar, comforting vessel, becomes the last, desperate bastion of solace.
It's offered not as a cure, but as a final, fleeting act of compassion, a brief respite from the agonizing grip of both physical pain and overwhelming despair. And who do you see laid low by this unseen adversary? None other than Master Grimshaw himself, the very man who once dispensed remedies and sage advice, now lies on his humble cot, his robust frame whittled away by the relentless fever. His eyes, once sharp and piercing, are now glazed and distant, yet they still struggle to focus on the anxious faces of his loved ones. You can almost feel the vitality slowly, gently, almost regretfully leaving his body, like a breath held too long, finally exhaling into the vast silence. His health isn't just diminishing, it's dissolving, evaporating into the cold, indifferent air, a poignant testament to humanity's fragile mortality. In these desperate hours, when prayers seemed to bounce off the heavens and remedies proved useless, the role of alcohol, particularly strong spirits or wine, shifted dramatically. It wasn't about celebration or status anymore. It was about raw, agonizing relief. The knowledge that alcohol could numb, even for a moment, became a grim comfort. It was used sometimes as a crude disinfectant for boils and wounds, a desperate attempt to ward off the infection from without, when the infection within was already rampant. But more often it was offered for a different, more profound purpose, to soften the edges of the unbearable. Watch now as a trembling hand lifts a small, simple cup, perhaps an old wooden one, worn smooth with time, towards Grimshaw's parched lips. It holds not a medicinal concoction, but a few drops of potent brandy, distilled from wine, or the strongest, darkest ale available. This isn't for healing, dear listener. Oh no, this is the final hope, expressed in its most quiet, most heartbreaking form. It's offered to dull the relentless ache in his bones, to quell the terrible racking cough, even if just for a few precious minutes. It's a desperate plea for a fleeting glimpse of peace, a brief, hazy oblivion before the ultimate silence descends. You can almost hear the whispered prayers accompanying each drop, a final act of love against the backdrop of utter helplessness. And what about social havoc in this chilling landscape? Here, it's not the boisterous brawls of the tavern or the subtle political maneuvering of the noble feast. This havoc is far more insidious, more profoundly unsettling. It's the silent, chilling unraveling of trust, the quiet disintegration of the very fabric of society. You see it in the way neighbors eye each other with suspicion, wondering if a cough from across the street might carry a death sentence. You feel it in the chilling silence of formerly bustling homes, now empty, or worse, containing only the dying. Funerals become hasty, unceremonious affairs, if they happen at all. The dead are buried in mass graves, their names forgotten, their families scattered or gone. This havoc is the creeping paranoia, the desperate self-preservation that makes people abandon their loved ones, shutter their doors, and whisper accusations of witchcraft or divine wrath. It's the silent collapse of compassion under the overwhelming weight of fear, a profound disintegration of faith not just in a higher power, but in each other. And then there's Bartholomew, Grimshaw's apprentice, now a seasoned yet utterly broken practitioner in his own right. He moves like a ghost through the stricken village, his satchel of herbs and poultices now tragically useless. His face, once eager with the pursuit of knowledge, is etched with a profound, soul-deep weariness. You see him now standing by Grimshaw's bedside, slowly, meticulously pouring those drops of strong spirits into the cup. His movements are precise, automatic, but his eyes, dear listener, tell a different story. They are filled with a crushing helplessness, a desolate understanding that all his learning, all his precious medicinal knowledge, all his carefully prepared tinctures and unguents are utterly meaningless against this invisible scourge. The very medicinal substances he dedicated his life to mastering now seem impotent, reduced to mere instruments of fleeting comfort. The cup in his hands becomes a vessel of his despair, a poignant symbol of the limits of human knowledge against the boundless power of nature's wrath. This grim scene, though softened in its portrayal, hammers home a brutal historical reality. The Black Death was not just a medical disaster, it was a societal cataclysm that shattered norms, tested faith, and exposed the fragility of human existence. In this context, alcohol, once a source of revelry or sustenance, became a grim final act of kindness, a fleeting escape from the inevitable. It symbolizes the tragic dissolution of health across the community, leaving behind a stark landscape of loss and an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. As the sun sets, casting long, mournful shadows across the deserted village, Grimshaw's labored breathing grows softer until it is no more. The cup, now empty, sits beside his lifeless hand, a silent witness to his final moments. Its contents may not have healed his body, but perhaps in those last precious seconds they offered a whisper of peace to his soul, a gentle transition into the vast unknown. You've walked with me through dusty fields and shadowed cloisters, danced in joyous festivals, and stood witness in solemn courts. You've tasted the small beer of survival, the wine of status, and the desperate solace of the dying. But now, dear listener, we fast forward, gliding through the centuries like a well-worn tale passed down through generations. What if I told you that the story of the cup doesn't end with the Middle Ages, but merely transforms, evolving with humanity itself, still carrying the echoes of hope, health, and havoc, yet in forms subtly, delightfully, and sometimes unsettlingly new? Are you ready to witness the tapestry of time unfold and see how the past still sips from the future's glass? You will find yourself standing with Finn, yes, that Finn, Ilara's son, the bright-eyed boy from the Harvest Festival, now a man grown, his face etched with the wisdom of years, yet his eyes still holding that spark of quiet optimism. He's no longer chasing after friends in the village square. He's the proprietor of what used to be Dame Isolde's humble alehouse, now a grander, more bustling inn, its timbers solid, its windows clear, serving travelers from far and wide. With a gesture, Finn invites you to look around, to reflect on the journey of the cup across the long, winding corridors of time. Eras have changed, customs have evolved, and the very vessels from which we drink have transformed, from the rough, sturdy wooden cups of our peasant ancestors to the shimmering, delicate glass chalices that now grace his polished tables. The drinks themselves have diversified, too, from the ever-present small beer to exotic wines and potent, fiery spirits brought by merchants from distant lands. Yet, as you observe the bustling scene, a profound truth settles in your heart. Human nature, in its endlessly fascinating complexity and its intricate relationship with the cup, persists. Havoc, you see, hasn't vanished. Oh no, it's far too tenacious for that. It has simply shape-shifted, like a cunning medieval alchemist transforming lead into, well, not gold, but certainly into something more subtly problematic. The days of outright drunken brawls in the street, like Gareth's unfortunate encounter with the vegetables, are far less common now, heavily frowned upon by stricter town watchmen and changing social mores. Public intoxication, while still occurring, is viewed with greater disapproval, almost a social taboo. But fear not. The spirit of Havoc is alive and well, just wearing a more sophisticated disguise. Instead of bruised knuckles, you now see the subtle pressures of commerce. That jovial merchant laughing a little too loudly at the next table? He's probably just outmaneuvered his rival in a trade deal, creating havoc in the form of a lost livelihood for someone else, a quiet economic disruption. The clinking of coins now signifies not just transactions, but the relentless, unspoken competition that dogs every trader, every craftsman, every innkeeper. Finn, for all his geniality, navigates this new landscape of subtle rivalries and financial anxieties. The new, stronger spirits, imported from lands beyond the familiar horizon, also bring their own brand of subtle chaos. Not necessarily street fights, but a deeper, more insidious form of dependence, a more refined, quiet despair that settles into the soul rather than spilling onto the cobblestones. The havoc is no longer about physical altercations, it's about the silent battles fought within, the mental strain of ambition, the quiet anxieties of a world moving faster. But alongside this transformed havoc, hope has not merely persisted, it has continuously been nurtured, growing richer and more complex with each passing generation. Finn himself is a testament to this evolving hope. He's not content with simply running a successful inn. His dreams extend beyond merely serving good ale. He nurtures a fervent, new hope for progress, for a better quality of life for his villagers. He dreams of clean, safe water for everyone, not just beer as the only reliable option. He yearns for a wider variety of invigorating drinks, yes, but more significantly, his hope extends to the advancement of knowledge, particularly concerning human health. He's keenly interested in the new theories about how diseases spread, a far cry from Grimshaw's desperate battle against the plague, about the benefits of hygiene, and about understanding the very substances they consume. He envisions a future where health is not a matter of luck or divine intervention, but of informed choices and scientific understanding. His curiosity is a beacon, illuminating a path toward a brighter, healthier future.
And now, for a moment, let Finn lead you to a quiet corner of his bustling inn. Here, carefully arranged on a sturdy hand-carved shelf, is the true legacy of the cup. Displayed not as museum pieces, but as cherished ancestors. You see them, the rough, chipped wooden tankard, perhaps a direct descendant of the one Osric nervously clutched. Next to it, a slightly more refined pewter mug, still bearing the faint marks of a blacksmith's hammer. A simple clay pitcher, perhaps like the one Dame Isolde used to fill her patron's cups, and yes, a slightly stained yet still elegant crystal goblet, reminiscent of those found in noble halls. Each old, worn cup is more than just an artifact. It's a silent storyteller, a relic holding within its very grain the whispers of countless lives. Finn, his voice soft with reverence, explains. This one, he might say, gently touching the wooden tankard, this was like the cups my grandmother Ilara used. It tells a tale of pure hope for survival, of health found in every sip when the water was poison. He'd then trace a finger over the pewter mug. This one might have seen Havoc in the village tavern, a loud argument over a spilled pint, but it also witnessed countless shared laughs. He'd then carefully pick up the crystal goblet. This, perhaps, from a noble house. It speaks of status, of elegant facades, and the more refined havoc of courtly intrigue. Each cup, Finn emphasizes, is a testament to the enduring human journey, a physical record of the hopes, health, and havoc that have accompanied us through the ages. They are a poignant reminder that even as society progresses, the fundamental human desires for comfort, connection, and understanding remain unchanged. And it's here, in this quiet corner amidst the lively inn, that the final connection is forged, a moment of profound contemplation. Finn, drawing you closer, shares the stories he heard from his mother, Ilara, and the other elders of the village. He speaks of the harrowing times of the Black Death, of how the simple cup, filled with ale or even stronger spirits, became the last desperate comfort, a symbol of compassion in the face of insurmountable despair. My mother told me, Finn muses, his gaze distant, that the cup, in those darkest days, was the last hope, not for a cure, but for a moment of peace. It literally saved the spirits of the dying, offering dignity in despair, and it helped those who survived to carry on. He talks of their resilient ancestors, of how communities rebuilt, how knowledge slowly, painstakingly accumulated, driven by the very suffering they endured. This inherited wisdom, this chain of stories linking generations, is the true bridge to a brighter future. Finn, holding a new sparkling glass goblet, a symbol of clarity, innovation, and perhaps a slightly less chaotic future, looks towards the horizon, where the setting sun paints the sky in hues of orange and purple. The sun dips below the distant hills, but it carries with it not an ending, but the promise of new dawns, new understandings. It's a journey that reveals not just how our ancestors drank, but how they lived, how they loved, how they suffered, and how they hoped. It reminds us that while the cup may change its form, from wood to pewter to shimmering glass, and its contents may evolve from humble beer to sophisticated spirits, the core of our humanity, our endless pursuit of hope, our fragile grasp on health, and our fascinating dance with havoc remains timeless. And so, dear listener,
Our journey with the medieval cup concludes, but its legacy lives on, not just in history books, but in every shared drink, every whispered secret, and every new idea that promises a healthier, more hopeful tomorrow. And perhaps, just perhaps, you'll never look at a simple cup the same way again. I truly hope you found fascinating insights and meaning in this adventure. If this video brought you something valuable, please consider giving it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more captivating stories to come. And once again, I'm truly curious, where in the world are you watching this video from? Please leave a comment and let's connect.